Welcome to this Bridgewater Now update. I'm John Luck. Numerous Bridgewater police officers are being commended for saving a man's life in a potentially dangerous situation. Back on August 23rd, the police department received multiple abandoned 911 phone calls, but eventually got in contact with a man who said he wanted to kill someone. Officers Christopher Rondeau and James Doherty were the first officers to arrive to the Center Street home of a 69-year-old man from Bridgewater. When arriving to the door, the man who called the police station had 2 knives in one hand and a third knife in his other hand. Officers Gino Sergio, Nicholas Mantalos, Clint Apaza, and K-9 officer Stephen Kingsley responded to the house as this was all taking place. During the ordeal, the man told officers that he wanted them to shoot him, quickly turning this into a serious mental health situation. The man, after dropping 2 of the knives, threatened to use the third knife on himself, and at that point, one of the officers deployed a taser. The man injured his shoulder when he fell to the ground, but he underwent a mental health evaluation and he was later transported to a hospital. No charges have been filed, and Police Chief Chris Del Monte released a statement saying, quote, "This was a prime example of professional police officers using their training to resolve a serious and potentially tragic situation. The officers relied on their training, exercised good judgment, worked as a team, took decisive action early, and followed established protocols for dealing with persons in a mental health crisis. This man was capable of hurting many people, including himself and responding officers. When we put our uniforms on every day, we never know what the day may bring, and that includes a human being in the midst of a mental health crisis, rushing out of his home with knives in each hand, charging toward our officers. Thanks to their professionalism, this man is still alive today and is getting help." The month of September is National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, but mental health is a concern year-round, and there are ways to reach out for help if you need someone to talk to, including calling the National Suicide Hotline at 1-800-273-TALK. That number again is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text NAMI to 741-741. The conversations are confidential. We want to switch gears now to politics, and over 5,000 people here in Bridgewater had their vote tabulated in the state primary, and we have the town results right now. Ed Markey won the Democratic candidacy for his seat, but here in Bridgewater, it was Joe Kennedy earning a majority of the votes. The town followed the trend of the state, voting for Kevin O'Connor on the Republican side. They will face each other in the general election coming up in November. Stephen Lynch beat Robbie Goldstein with a Bridgewater tally of 2696 to 1209. The primary was the latest vote to feature early voting, which was held at the Academy building with social distancing measures being used. And again, the general election is coming up on November 3rd. Starting on September 14th, the Bridgewater Water Department will begin its annual hydrant flushing. This will run over the next 12 weeks, and the flushing will occur from 7 p.m. through midnight with weather permitting. When the hydrant flushing happens, there may be a decrease in water pressure, and discoloration may happen as well. If there is continued discoloration, run the cold tap water until the water clears. For more information on the hydrant flushing, which again starts on September 14th and runs for the next 12 weeks, call the Water Department at 508-697-0910. 400 years ago, the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock. A book that has been in the works for 12 years around that event was recently published, and this has a blend of historical fiction and modern events. 103 Pilgrims was written by Rick Ponce, and Mary Evers talked to the author in part 1 of this interview.
Mr. Ponce, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
So we're here to talk about your recently published book, 103 Pilgrims, which was published back in March of this year, back when the world was completely different. And as we get close to celebrating the 400th anniversary of the Pilgrims arriving in Plymouth in Massachusetts, we wanted to discuss your book. So let's start with, what was your inspiration to start writing this book?
Well, actually, I started writing the book about 12 years ago, and it took me that long. I'm working on the sequel. Hopefully, it will not take me quite as long on the sequel as it did this book. I actually started writing it when I did a lot of traveling, both throughout the United States and in Europe. So on those long flights or those flight delays, I started writing some of the stories that people told me about the area when I lived there. I lived in Plymouth for 25 years, and I had 3 sons that were born there, and they all live in the Plymouth area. 2 of the sons were born in Jordan Hospital, which I believe is now Beth Israel Deaconess Hospital.
Yeah.
And their two wives work as nurses in that hospital.
Oh, wow.
So we're kind of embedded. And while I was there, I just thought there were a lot of the culture was very interesting, and a lot of stories I heard were very interesting.
So the book takes place modern day, but stretches back to things that happened in 1620. Was it always your intention to get into the deep history of Plymouth itself, or did that kind of come to you as you were writing these stories down?
Actually, both. I actually came up with the idea, like I said, about 12 years ago. And I said, and without a spoiler alert, I said, what would have happened if they discovered that there was a stowaway on board the Mayflower? And taking that premise, well, why don't we know about it today? Why were people trying to cover that up if that really did happen? And then that's how I started writing the story.
And we'll have the rest of the interview coming up for you next week right here on The Update. If you'd like more information on Rick's book, you can visit 103pilgrims.com. Turning to health, and one constant throughout this pandemic is working from home. Parents and adults have been working from home for the better part of 6 months now, but now kids start to join the party and will be working from home as well. This is a situation that can certainly create some stress.
Before the pandemic, when mom and dad were home, it meant that mom and dad were available and it was family time. And this is a really challenging shift in the paradigm for kids to make, to think now that when mom and dad are home, they may not always be available and it may not always be family time.
Doctors say that it's important to set clear boundaries so kids know when mom and dad are working or when they can ask for a snack or for help with an assignment. While this is all going on, parents shouldn't feel bad about their productivity levels either. During this time, it can be hard to multitask with new demands, so be sure to take breaks when you're able to.
Have some forgiveness for yourself and be patient with yourself and your partner and your children, as these are all precedented times, and just try to find those moments of happiness to be with your family amongst the chaos.
Doctors also say when kids are laying remotely, it's okay to let them sleep in a little bit so then you'll have some alone time to work for yourself. A reminder, the BR School District will be starting classes next week, and most students will be learning virtually 3 days a week. We have much more on that in my interview with BR Superintendent Derek Swenson on our BTV Access Facebook page. Thanks for watching this update. I'm John Luck.